Hello and welcome to the video tutorials for this year's ornaments. I'm just going to walk through some of the quick basics to start off with, and then if you've already watched this part of the video, you can skip to the actual video of the specific ornament being stitched. If this is your first time watching any of these videos, this is just the beginner's intro, so it's going to be the same for all 4 videos. So the first thing is your kit will come with all of your floss. If you got the kit of 4, you're going to come with these 4. And if you got the 12, you're going to have a bunch that will be used for all 12 designs. Your needle, there should be 2 in your pack. And then all of your designs, pending that you got the full kit. If you just got the wood only, you will have this and your instruction booklet. And that should be everything you need. Just a disclaimer, you can, for finishing the back, I'll be showing the instructions on how to finish the back of these. But it is sort of up to you how you decide. You can leave them blank like this, or you can cut out and trace the felt and glue it to the back to cover, or use another creative option for covering the back. The supplies for this one, you've got your floss, your needle, and your templates. The floss, you're going to follow the floss color guide and apply whichever color to where you want. You can always mix it up and change it however you want. This entire pattern uses 6 strands of floss. The only exception is these little French knots here. You're going to use 3 strands of the red and 3 strands of the white, and I'm going to show you really quickly how to do that actually in the tutorial for the stocking. So you'll see that right in there. Otherwise, a few things to note is when you're taking your floss from your bundle, you're always going to want to pull the floss from the end that has the number. It is designed to not tangle when you pull it out. If you pull the end that is over here, it's going to get into a tangled mess. So that's something to note. And then when you're pulling out your thread, you're going to use about an arm's length of thread. So you'll pull out and then I normally just pull my arm all the way out and then give it a little snip. Whoops, you want to give it as clean of a line as possible so that when you're threading your needle, if you find that you struggle to thread a needle with 6 strands, you can split the floss, which is something we talk about when we're doing our one here. But for this case, if you struggle to thread it with all 6 strands, you can split your floss. One thing to split is just by pulling the ends, all the pieces will separate, and then divide it into 3s. You try to do it as naturally as possible, because when you pull them into the natural way they want to separate, it's easier to pull them out. This guy's gonna get in the way. But you're just gonna pull your thread till it's fully separated. And then this gives you 3 strands of your floss, and you can thread those 3 strands a little bit easier and then tie the ends together. And basically what you're doing is you're doubling up your thread. So by going like this, putting your strands together, you're still going to end up stitching with 6 strands. But you only have to thread 3 through the eye of the needle. So that is helpful if you struggle to thread your needle. And then for tying the end, I typically just do a couple of knots. For the first stitch you'll do on your ornaments, you're gonna wanna do a nice big knot at the end. So since I'm tying 3 strands, I'm actually gonna tie this like quite a few times. Just really make that knot as big as I possibly can, because as you pull this through, so I'm just going to use this as an example. This isn't the correct stitching method, but you're going to want to make that knot big enough so that it doesn't pull through the back. Since these knots are large enough for the needle and the thread to come through, they also means that your knot would pull through on just a regular knot. So you really want to focus on that. If you are stitching with it where there are stitches already created and you're starting a new strand, you don't have to do the larger knot. You can just do a standard knot. And then you just feed your thread underneath of already finished stitches, and then it'll hook onto there, and then you can start stitching in any spot without worrying whether your knot will come through. So that would be the trick for that. And then that's the same for when you're securing your stitches at the end of stitching. Once you've come up from the back and you're ready to finish and tie off this thread, you're just gonna put it through the back of your stitches wrapping it around at least one time until it creates a loop here. You're going to take your needle and go through the loop to create a knot. Typically just one time doing that is enough. If you are worried that it's going to come through, you can do 2, go through underneath the stitches twice and knot it 2 times. But there isn't a lot of wear and tear on these, so you shouldn't have to worry too much about that. And then obviously for threading 6 strands, you're just doing the same thing. You're just taking a full piece. So you can do it either way. You can do it over the method where I showed you, the folded over and tied together end method, or you can use all 6 strands and thread them. Just depends on how comfortable you are threading a needle. These needles are size 24 tapestry needles. These are designed for a size 24 tapestry needle to fit through of a John James needle. So every needle is a little bit different. If you are struggling with getting your needle through on, say, an area where maybe there's more than one stitch through the same hole, you might need to size down on your needle if you are purchasing your own supplies. So that would be for people who have purchased the wood only kit. Sorry, the last thing I was going to show you is if you're wanting to use a different type of knot, you can use just a knot where you've wrapped it around your finger and pulled it through. Or another option is the quilter's knot. So you can take your threaded needle and your end and put them horizontal to each other, lay that thread on top and pinch it with 2 fingers against the needle, wrap the thread a few times, push your needle through the pinched wrapped needle and pull it through, and you should create a knot. So 3 or 4 wraps of that should be enough. Trim your end, and then you can get started stitching. For the most part, that's everything you need to know. Any tips that I tell you on specific stitch will be told during the stitching. And I'm only going to show examples of the stitches once, like on a shirt, so that you don't feel like you might miss something if you don't decide to watch like a whole hour-long video of stitching the entire ornaments. So we will get into it, and we'll start on our first ornament right now. Our next ornament to complete is the candy cane, which is honestly my favorite ornament. So you're going to start with your red. That's the base for our whipped back stitch. So you're going to take a full strand of an arm's length piece of floss in 6 strands and just thread that and get that on your needle first. Okay, so the first part is to create a back stitch that you're going to later whip. So we're starting with a nice large knot that we can, and I'm going to come up a little further in. I don't want my knot to be right on the edge. So I'm actually going to do my first stitch starting here. I'm going to move out so that my knot with that very first knot is kind of in the center, so it's not showing from the front. And then you're going to want to complete all the way to the edges. So we're actually going to do a wrap around it, come down through that hole there, and then we can come back to this hole here. Come up and down, then up 1 stitch apart, back down. And then the nice thing about using these holes is that you can actually, instead of going all the way to here to do like the traditional back stitch, you can come back down up through the hole there, go down, and then do the same wraparound technique on the outside edge. And again, we want to make sure that we're keeping the tension pretty firm just so that it's nice and secure. And then securing that thread at the back to tie off. So just through the underneath the stitch and then through that loop to create a knot. And normally once is enough. And then really try to keep your ends nice and trimmed, just because you do end up getting, you can cover it. Some people I found last year did not cover them at all. They just trimmed them nice and then hung them on the tree and you didn't see them at all. So it's really going to be personal preference whether you want to take the time to cover the back. So the next thing is to take your white to do the whipped part. Okay, so for our whipped part, you're going to want to secure this white thread, actually, sorry, over here, behind the stitches to get started. So you're not coming up really through a hole. You're just securing it there. And then we're gonna flip to the front and start whipping it underneath of our other stitches. So how you do that is you literally just scoop it underneath. So you don't wanna, like, I know I said you wanna keep these strands tight. I know you're probably thinking like, well, if they're too tight, I can't get underneath of them. You do still want them quite tight, because if they are too loose, then they're gonna end up pulling. If there's slack on there, then they're gonna end up pulling and you're gonna have a mess. So you wanna keep them as tight as possible, because you will be able to get underneath of them. It just might take a little shimmying, but typically there's enough slack. So you're just gonna whip it around. So you go under from the same side on each one, and just, it whips it around like it's almost like a wrap. So you want to start, if you start whipping from one side, if you go under from one side, I keep saying whipping, but that might not make sense to everybody. If you go under from one side, you want to go under the stitch from that side each time so that it wraps it around. So on this last one, I'm going to still go under and get it under, and it's just gonna kind of go as I go around, and then I'll pull it to the back and secure it off. Now, if you are continuing to do the rest of the stitches, the best way to do this is to still secure it underneath the stitches on the line you're doing. So in this case, like I've done this line, so I want to secure it under these stitches. Kind of wrap it around so that you've almost created like a knot so that this strand will stay in the spot you want it to. Then jump up here, wrap it around these ones, and then start again. So you're kind of like anchoring it to the spot you want it to be. If you jump over here and you try to start whipping, this thread is going to be in a weird position. So you want to wrap it around the stitches at the back here and then start again. So that you'll do that on each one instead of tying off completely each time. So there is your whipped back stitch for your candy caned strand, and then we'll go into your lazy daisies. So you've already got your whipped back stitch. I do suggest starting with the whipped back stitch. If you're trying to whip it and you've got all these lazy daisies here, you're just going to hit them and destroy them. So it has to be done with the whipped back stitch first, and then you're going to come up through the hole and just, I know it can be like on this one, it's going to be a little tough for me because I've got some knots there. So you just want to look at the back and try to sort of find a spot to not go through the knot, if that makes sense. Like that knot that's there, I don't want to try to get through that. It's going to be too hard. So I've moved it kind of out of the way so that I can pull my strand through. And then I'm going to have to do the same thing when I'm coming back down. I'm looking for a spot where, and one of the things that I sometimes do with my finger is I'll actually like use my finger to move everything out of the way so that I have a nice clear path. It's just patience and like just going nice and slow and just moving everything out of the way and then watching. So as that loop comes up, I'm gonna go up through this one and put the loop through it. Excuse me. So then you've pulled that loop down, and this is probably the part that people find the most finicky, is how to get that loop, especially when you've got like a longer lazy daisy like some of these will be. You want to get that loop into the right spot. So first thing to note when you're trying to get that loop exactly where you want it to be is when you put these stitches in, putting this one on this side and the other one next to it. So if they're crossed over, flip your loop so that this strand has come up on this side of the hole and this strand has come up on this side of the hole, if that makes sense, so that they kind of have like a flat curve. If they're twisted at the bottom here, you're going to end up with kind of a funky shape. So that's something to look for. And then pulling the tension until it sits so that the tension is laying exactly how you want. And you can kind of fiddle with it. Like I use my thumb and I flatten it and I play with it a little bit to get it where I want it to be. And then once it's in the right spot, once you've pulled the slack out so that the loop sits at the top where it's no higher than this hole, it's right at the hole, then you're gonna go down on the other side, back down through the hole. I like to put my thumb on top of my loop to keep it in place and then secure it with a little anchor, pulling tight enough that there's no slack, but not so tight that you're pulling the Lazy Daisy through, and then all done. So you're just gonna repeat that a couple of times, quite a few actually. So again, I'm gonna go back down through the same hole and then up, put my loop on top of it, and then guide it. Some of them will sit nicer. This one seems to really want to do a nice little curved shape, and then go back down through the hole. And then you've created a perfect little Lazy Daisy, and the same with this one. So I'm making sure that I'm coming up on this side, on the right side of the whipped back stitch, putting it down, and then pulling it until it's kind of nice and tight. And then like I want the top of the loop that I've created to be no higher when pulled down, like when flattened with my thumb, than where that hole is. If it's pushing out to be higher than that, you need to pull more slack out and then securing it. So there you go. That is your Lazy Daisy. And you will probably use your needle to fluff them up and put them in the right spot. You'll get a couple that maybe didn't look exactly how you wanted them to. You can either redo them or you can wait till you're all finished and see if you like it. There's always going to be some that don't look perfect, but typically when you pull it away and you give yourself a minute to look at it, they don't always have to be perfect to work. So don't be too hard on yourself. I know that often happens with the Lazy Daisies, but I can assure you that most of the time the mistakes that you're seeing, you're the only one who will see them. So don't try to fix them right away. Give yourself some grace, give yourself a few minutes, even give yourself a day, and then come back and say, is it worth driving myself crazy over? So there you go. That is the 3 stitches, or the 2 stitches that you'll need for this candy cane. And then for finishing the back, it is up to you. We've talked about this in all the tutorials. I'll show you the tutorial on how to finish the back. Okay, so for backing your ornaments, you can leave them unfinished, or you can add something like felt or cardboard or something else you want to add to the back. So basically my suggestion for doing this is to trace it out. In past years, we have, I have included the felt, just be careful of your stitches there. I've included the felt, but I've found that a lot of people use their own color, they use other methods. So for this year, we just went with, you guys can use your own creative. So you don't need to actually do the loop there. So I'm just gonna go like that. It's not complicated. You can do it however you'd like. These scissors are not made for cutting, but I would cut on the inside of this line by about 1/8 of an inch. Oops, because we don't want the felt to show from the back, or from the front, sorry. You're supposed to be finishing it the most seamless knot. So then you're just gonna take that, and you can either hot glue it, or you can glue it with a glue gun, whichever you prefer. I did suggest last year even adding like a little note on the back, or writing 2024, or like Merry Christmas. Just adding like a little message on the back is really nice. Before gluing them on, depending if it's a gift or not. So there's lots of fun ways that you can make this special, but basically my suggestion is just glue a little felt on the back, and they're all finished. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed making these, and I can't wait to see them. Please tag me on your social media, because I would love to see them, or just send me pictures if you want. I love seeing them.